Today, we're not really focusing on the man himself, but on the world that shaped him, and what a world it was. It was like a pressure cooker. We're going to set the scene for one of history's most influential figures by really understanding the powerful forces at play all around him. Okay, so let's just dive right in. To get a real feel for this era, you have to get a handle on the incredibly complex political, social, and religious climate. It was a time of immense tension, and believe me, understanding that tension is absolutely key to the whole story. So, here's how we're gonna break it all down. First, we'll look at the Roman occupation that just loomed over everything. Then, we're gonna zoom in on what daily life was like, explore the core pillars of Jewish faith, meet the major religious parties who are all competing with each other, and see how these deep, deep divisions set the stage for a dramatic new chapter. All right, first up, the dominant political reality of the day, Roman occupation. You just cannot understand this period without grasping the constant presence and, frankly, the pressure of the Roman Empire hanging over Palestine. And let me tell you, this relationship was anything but stable. For the Jewish people, Roman rule was a source of constant friction. I mean, you had a taxation system that was notorious for extortion. You had this feeling that your entire national heritage was under threat. And then you had a stream of Roman officials, guys like Pontius Pilate, who were known for committing atrocities and just constantly offending religious sensitivities. It created this incredibly uneasy and turbulent political situation. But here's a surprising twist. Despite Rome's heavy hand, the Jews actually had a significant degree of self-government. You see, a lot of the local administration was handled by the Sanhedrin, a powerful council of Jewish leaders who got to manage civil and religious affairs using their own laws. Okay, so let's shift gears a little and talk about the social and cultural fabric of this occupied land. What was daily life actually like for the people living under this Roman shadow? Well, the short answer is, it totally depended on who you were. It was a world of really sharp contrasts. And one of the biggest divides was between the religious elites and the common people, who were often called the people of the land. Groups like the Pharisees, especially, kind of looked down on the average person, who they saw as ignorant of the finer points of the law. And this wasn't just a small gap. It created a massive social and spiritual chasm. This was also a huge cultural crossroads. While most everyday people spoke Aramaic, and that's the language Jesus himself taught in, Greek culture and language were everywhere, especially in the cities. This meant a lot of the region was effectively bilingual, caught right between ancient tradition and a much more global Hellenistic influence. Now let's turn to the force that shaped every single aspect of daily life more than anything else: religion. For the Jews of the first century, faith was everything, and that faith was built on two gigantic pillars. Pillar number one was the law, or the Torah. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just the written text of the first 5 books of the Bible. Nope. It also included this massive body of oral tradition. All these interpretations and applications passed down through generations that was considered just as valid and just as binding. It was the absolute guide for how you lived your life. And the second pillar, the temple in Jerusalem. This was the beating heart of Jewish worship. It was the place for sacrifice, for the great festivals, for pilgrimage. It was this incredibly powerful, unifying symbol that connected Jews not just in Palestine, but from all across the entire Roman Empire. But here's the thing. While faith was central, it was far from monolithic. This deeply religious society was actually fractured into several competing parties, and each one had a very different vision for what it meant to be a faithful Jew. So let's meet the main players. You had the Pharisees, who were super zealous for both the written and the oral law, and were actually pretty popular. Then you had the Sadducees, a more aristocratic, politically powerful group who rejected all those oral traditions. You also had the Essenes, a kind of separatist, monastic-like group who saw the temple as corrupt. And finally, the Zealots, a political movement dead set on violent liberation from Rome. Now, of all those groups, the most visible public debate, the real rivalry that defined the religious landscape, was between the two most influential parties, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And I mean, they disagreed on almost everything. The Pharisees accepted the oral law. The Sadducees? Not a chance. The Pharisees believed in resurrection, in angels, and the afterlife. The Sadducees denied all of it. Even when it came to the law, the Pharisees often leaned toward being more lenient, while the Sadducees were known for being incredibly severe. And this just shows you how intense the whole intellectual climate was. The debates weren't just between the parties. Even within the Pharisees themselves, you had rival schools of thought, like the more liberal school of Hillel and the much stricter school of Shammai, arguing endlessly over the tiniest points of the law. So let's just put it all together for a second. You've got political occupation, you have deep social divides, and you have constant, fiery religious arguments. The result? A society just simmering with tension. A world completely on edge, just waiting for a spark. And right into this tense environment came this widespread expectation. This hope for a figure who was prophesied in the ancient texts. A figure known as the Messiah, which is Hebrew for the Anointed One, who it was believed would be sent by God to deliver the people and restore Israel. It really was a powder keg of a situation. You had the external pressure from a hated occupying force. You had deep internal conflicts over how to live and how to worship. And all of it was being fueled by this burning, varied hope for a divine liberator. The stage was well and truly set for something dramatic to happen, which really leaves us with the final big question. In a world so broken by occupation, by infighting, and by all these competing ideas, what kind of person, what kind of Messiah could possibly unite the people and bring any real hope? Understanding this incredibly volatile backdrop is the essential first step to understanding the story that was about